Sup everyone. So, as we all know, whenever From Software releases a game, every developer has to copy the model. First it was Another Crab's Treasure, then it was Code Vein 2, and now Nioh 3 has followed in their footsteps by making the game open world. Sort of. Okay, so it's not exactly open world, but hey, you got the map, the going in any direction, and the collectibles you find everywhere, so kind of. However, there are some distinct differences. First of all, the world is separated out. Instead of there just being one big map, there are 3 to 4 zones that the player can explore, and each zone is very spread out like an open world. Those zones are further split up into smaller zones, and each of those zones have an exploration level 0 through 4. The higher the level, the more of a buff the player gets. It's a nice way to reward the player for exploring, to give them the incentive to explore. The same thing can be said about things like the Kodamas and the Chichikos and the Scampus. They are all great rewards and incentivize the player to go out and explore every inch of the map. And I like the way they changed how the Kodama buffs work in this game. They made it a blanket buff, so now Kodama buffs carry over to the next area. You don't have to find literally every single Kodama from each area and then choose a specific buff like the last 2 games, and I greatly enjoyed that. They also added these things called titles, which grant even more buffs to the player, and look how cute they are. And the Scampus and Chichikos, look at them, so kawaii, am I right? Now, the map does not have the wonder and awe that the map in Exploration had for say a game like Elden Ring, but it does the job, and it's still quite nice exploring different locations like the icy tundras of Heian, and the crumbling rift areas are really cool looking, full of mystic lanterns and devilish enemies to fight. As for the combat, the combat. It is great. They give you so much room to experiment with different variety and builds that it makes the combat really cool. There are 2 different modes that you can be in, Ninja mode and Samurai mode, and each mode has its own benefits and downsides. Each mode has their own variety of weapons, so ninjas have kusarigamas and tonfas, whereas samurais have spears and hammers. It really lets you get creative with your playstyle, and letting you reset your stats whenever you want also helps out with this. I like to personally play a sort of hit and run style, so I mainly played ninja, and when the enemies went down and I wanted to go for more damage, I would switch to samurai style and spam the attack button as much as I could for DPS. I also prefer dodging to blocking, so ninja style was right up my alley. I also like the addition of the spirit ability. Depending on the ability, it really helps to add DPS when you need it, or to poke quickly at the enemy before getting away. Each mode has so many different options you can go and different playstyles you can lean towards. The skill points you receive throughout the game get used in this really cool skill tree, which has a variety of options that the player can go, such as buffs to stances and different ninja jutsus you can use. I was kind of a stickler though. I don't really like changing my playstyle that much, so I just went with the starting jutsus and projectiles, and that was kind of it. I probably should have experimented more, but I didn't really feel like it. Sue me. The 2 best things about the combat though are obviously the counter and the living weapons. Man, those things never get old to use. When you switch modes from ninja mode to samurai mode and vice versa, you do a sort of counter that works against these red attacks where the opponent starts glowing red before doing a stronger attack. And when it lands, man does it hit. There's so much weight to it, so much impact. It makes you feel like a badass when you hit it. The counter has been changed a bit since Nioh 2. You still need to time it, but it feels much more forgiving and satisfying to hit. The living weapons are also really sick. That is your super mode. When you really want to do DPS and your gauge is full, you just let her rip. Check this shit out. Now, despite all of these really good things, there are still some flaws to the game. While the exploration is very open at first, towards the end, it kind of just devolves down to narrow hallways and paths that you go down. They do have a few options of which directions you can go, but all in all, the exploration still ended up being pretty restrictive, especially towards the end of the game. It just felt more like Nioh 1 and 2's exploration as time went on. Now, I know that's not necessarily a drawback for some people, it really depends on the player, but it felt like the map and the whole open zone thing still felt pretty restrictive, that is all. And to me, that made it not really an open world or open zone game, if you know what I mean. Now, while the exploration is not necessarily a point of criticism, the next part definitely is. I do not like the loot system of the game. It feels very looter shooter, and I've never been a fan of that, especially for a Souls-like game. Part of the cool part of exploration in Souls games is that you can find really cool stuff. You never know what you're gonna get. Sometimes it's a cool spell, other times it's a sick weapon. These things feel more personal, and it makes you feel like you're building up a collection. Like you just found treasure, and you can't wait to test these bad boys out. In Nioh, the weapons and armors you pick up just feel kind of like numbers. They don't feel unique. They don't feel really cool to pick up. You just kind of have them, and it's like whatever. And I think that does hurt the exploration. Now, each weapon does have a familiarity bar and also various buffs, but that does not really help with feeling like it's an extension of your character. It just feels like numbers still. The weapons and armors feel so generic. They've got no soul, you feel me? I guess this is made up for because each weapon type has its own playstyle and stuff, but I still do not like the loot system of the game because the weapons don't feel personal. And that's nothing to say about the healing system. I hate the elixir system. Other Souls-like games have figured this out already, where you have a limited amount you can use at first, but you can upgrade the amount and capacity you can heal. That is the way to do things. It is a tried and tested mechanic. This game, you need to farm elixirs from enemies, and that is annoying. Now, the good thing is, you can upgrade your Kodama Blessing to get more elixirs from enemies, so you will never really run out unless you're like hard stuck on a boss, but I still hate that. And the max you can carry is 8, which is way too low. I know that there's a skill that lets you carry up to 11, but even then, I much prefer the system of other Souls-like games. Another weakness of the game is its enemy variety. I do think that it is lacking, and I wish that they would have introduced more enemy types. The first level has the most variety, with like 20 plus different kinds of enemies. I don't know the exact number, but it is a lot. But every other level after that, it felt like there were only like 3 new enemies each zone. I understand with a game like this that it is hard to come up with and program new enemies for every single level, but either way, I do think it is a knock on this game. I wish they would have added more variety to it. And the bosses this game are not really memorable in my opinion. There are like 4 or 5 that I remember distinctly. The snake boss at the beginning, the guy with the lightning blade, the envy demon, but other than that, the bosses don't really feel that memorable, which is a shame because these games ride and die with their cool boss fights, and to me, they just weren't that memorable. They all felt like they had the same kind of movesets, the same gimmicks, and the same kind of super red moves that you can counter. The bosses definitely were not bad, per se, and they were all pretty fun to fight, except for the last few, but in general, I thought that they just did not leave a lasting impression on me. Lastly, this game really started to grind my gears on the last zone/level. I don't know if it was the enemy variety, the boss fights, or the fact that I admittedly felt pretty rushed to write this review. I don't know, but the last level, and by extension the bosses, felt like such a chore to get through. I fought Okita Soji like 20 times, then just decided to call it quits. I think I only had like 1 boss after him left, but unfortunately I did not finish the game, because the last part of the game was just too tedious for me, and I was not having any fun. And isn't having fun what it's all about? Lastly, this game really started to grind my gears on the last zone/level. I don't know if it was the enemy variety, the boss fights, or the fact that I admittedly felt pretty rushed to write this review. I don't know, but the last level, and by extension the bosses, felt like such a chore to get through. I fought Okita Soji like 20 times, then just decided to call it quits. I think I only had like 1 boss after him left, but unfortunately I did not finish the game, because the last part of the game was just too tedious for me, and I was not having any fun. And isn't having fun what it's all about? So, while I did not finish the game, I did have a lot of fun with it for the most part. Yes, I do have some issues with it, but as a whole, this game is good, and I do think it is an improvement on the first 2 games. I would give this game a 7 out of 10. And that is going to do it. For anyone still watching, I really appreciate the support. If you could like and subscribe or support me on Patreon, I would really appreciate it, especially with some of the stuff going through my life right now. I don't really want to get into it, but there's some stuff going on, and I would really appreciate the support. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.